everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We are going to demystify the mechanics and the history of a very specific, honestly fascinating type of poem, the Spenserian Sonnet. We're going to look at how poetry is built, literally like architecture. Because when you read a sonnet, you really aren't just reading words on a page, you're essentially walking through a highly structured, carefully engineered building. And today, we are looking at the blueprints. Okay, let's dive right in by starting with the poet John Donne's brilliant description of the sonnet. He called it a little world made cunningly. I absolutely love this quote. It just perfectly captures the magic and the sheer spatial constraint of the form. Think about it. A poet has to take the vast, chaotic universe of complex human emotions and compress it into exactly 14 lines. Not 13, not 15, exactly 14. It truly is a tiny, cunningly crafted world. Section 1. The 14-line little world. Before we can fully appreciate Edmund Spenser's specific design, we really need to understand the historical foundation of this 14-line universe. So this architectural standard didn't just pop out of thin air. It actually traveled quite a bit. It started off as an artistic invention way back in 13th century Sicily, credited to Giacomo de Lentini. From there, it became an absolute pan-European sensation, largely thanks to Petrarch in 1327, whose love poems pretty much put the form on the map. And finally, fast forward to the 1520s, courtiers like Sir Thomas Wyatt and the Earl of Surrey translated these works, bringing that 14-line structure straight into the English court of King Henry VIII. Part 2, meet the sonnet family. As this poetic form spread all across Europe, it naturally evolved into 3 major structural blueprints. You can really think of these as the big 3 floor plans of the sonnet family. The Italian sonnet divides its 14 lines into an 8-line octave and a 6-line sestet. Then the English, or Shakespearean sonnet, shifts that into 3 4-line quatrains and a final 2-line couplet. But look closely at that 3rd row. Spenser took the 3-quatrain layout of the English sonnet, but completely reimagined the rhyme scheme to create something entirely his own. Which brings us to Section 3, Spenser's unique poetic blueprint. How exactly does this build into the specific house that Edmund Spenser constructed? Well, why did he feel the need to mess with a formula that was already working so well for everyone else? Honestly, it boils down to pure ambition. Spenser, who was a contemporary of Shakespeare, was fiercely determined to establish a distinct national literary pride. He wanted an English legacy that went way beyond Geoffrey Chaucer, and he really wanted to rival the classic poets. For Spenser, leaving his own mark was just as important as national pride. He quite literally wanted his personal signature carved into the architecture. So here's how that interlocking rhyme scheme actually functions in practice. Notice how the letters overlap? The B rhyme from that first quatrain becomes the starting B rhyme of the second. The C rhyme from the second bridges right into the third. It acts exactly like overlapping bricks in a masonry wall. This is such an ingenious design because it physically pulls the reader's ear forward into the next stanza. It creates this continuous flowing momentum that the other sonnet types just don't have. And here's the really cool part. Because the physical blueprint is different, the mental argument changes too. In the Italian format, you usually get a problem presented in the first 8 lines and then a solution in the final 6, pivoting on a turn or volta right at line 9. But Spenser's format? It allows him to build 3 interconnected ideas across those overlapping quatrains before finally dropping a distinct commentary in the concluding couplet. His volta gets pushed all the way back to the incredibly late 13th line. Let's move to Part 4, deconstructing a Moretti LXV. Now that we understand the theory behind the blueprint, let's actually walk through a famous piece of architecture built with this exact design. What is absolutely fascinating about this specific poem, Sonnet 75 from Spenser's Amoretti sequence, is the real-life context. See, most early modern love sonnets were written about these distant, idealized, totally unattainable women. But this poem is grounded in reality. It was written specifically for Elizabeth Boyle, the woman Spenser actually courted and eventually married. He already knows they're going to end up together. Now, the story here is beautifully simple on the surface. The poet writes his beloved's name on the sand, but the ocean tide washes it away. He tries again, the waves erase it again. But then, the woman actually speaks up. She rebukes him. She essentially tells him he's being arrogant and vain for trying to immortalize something that is inherently mortal. So this physical reality of a beach tide erasing letters suddenly pulls us straight into a deep emotional dialogue about human mortality and decay. And boom, right here is where we hit that delayed structural turn we talked about earlier. Spenser places his volta so late in the poem, boldly pushing back against his future wife's critique. He says, not so. He insists that while lesser things will die and turn to dust, his poetry will conquer death. It is a sudden, super powerful shift from the inevitability of the ocean tide directly to the absolute permanence of his art. Which leads us perfectly into part 5, the power of poetic immortality. Because the ultimate goal of these carefully constructed sonnets was the desire to outlast time itself. Our source material describes this with an amazing phrase, early modern skywriting. Instead of just making her name survive on Earth, Spenser is effectively projecting her virtues into eternity. By praising her so perfectly in his verse, he believed he was actually imbuing her immortal soul with added value, guaranteeing that their love wouldn't just survive history, but would literally be renewed and enriched in the heavens. But, okay, there is a hilarious twist to all this grand ambition. Despite promising to write her glorious name in the heavens, and despite the entire premise of the poem being about writing her name in the sand, Spenser completely fails to mention the name Elizabeth anywhere in the 14 lines. Literally nowhere. It's this remarkably common wild irony among Elizabethan sonneteers. They talk endlessly about immortalizing a name they never actually bother to write down. Which leaves us with this final really interesting question to ponder about this cunningly made little world. We know Spenser built an incredible architectural structure with his unique rhyme scheme. We know he crafted a beautiful narrative pushing back against mortality. But did this masterpiece truly immortalize the woman it was supposedly written for? Or did it just immortalize the genius of the man who built it? Definitely something to think about the next time you read a love poem.